Good morning, guys. It is Thursday, February 29th, 2024. This is Bathrobe Business. I'm Georgi Oganov. I got the coffee and I got the news. So I think my cold is back too, by the way. But anyway, I don't know why it keeps coming and going. I've got a number of news stories, but inflation is going to be the leader, right? I'm not going to bury the lead. Let's jump right into it. So PCE, that's today's reading, not CPI as we had about a week and a half ago. So CPI was accelerating, right? It was up to above expectations. PCE came in at expectations. Now you might be asking what's the difference? Even I had to Google really what is the difference to kind of narrow it down. So PCE is the preferred measure that the Fed likes because they believe it's the more accurate measure of inflation. That's because CPI, the one we had last time, really measures out-of-pocket expenses, how much individuals are spending out of pocket. PCE tries to narrow in directly on the cost of goods and services. So that's why PCE is a little bit more accurate. It's pretty much what I had guesstimated yesterday that it's probably going to come in on par or slightly elevated, and it came in right on par. So here's the numbers. The Personal Consumer Expenditure Price Index, excluding food and energy costs, increased by 0.4% for the month and 2.8% from a year ago. So year to year, we're seeing 2.8% PCE inflation. Headline PCE, this is including food and energy. The last one is excluding, increased by 0.3 monthly and 2.4% on a 12-month basis. So if you're including food and energy, which I personally do, I think that is the more accurate measure. It's actually looking more optimistic than not. Because I think food and energy have to be included in inflation prices because those are primary expenditures for most consumers. That at times is their largest expenditures outside of their living space. So that rose 0.3 for the month or 2.4% on a 12-month basis. So looking at that, it seems like, oh, well, the Fed is going to cut imminently. I still don't think so because I still think 2.4% is still higher than on target, and they're trying to bring inflation down to 2%. So half a percentage point may not matter, but when you're having half a percentage point on a year-to-year basis, that's still accelerating at half a percent faster than supposed to. Sorry, that sounds really stupid to say. But essentially, over a 10-year basis, you're going up a full percentage point higher than you're supposed to, right? So that's why I think that this is not a small number to scoff at. I think that the Fed is going to still keep maintaining rates until they see it at 2% or at least very close to 2%. I don't think that this is still stimulus to cut, especially since this is one number. We're still going to have another Fed meeting. They're going to see how the next inflation number comes in probably in March or April, and then evaluate from there. So I don't think we're seeing cuts in the first quarter, second quarter. I think it's, like I was saying before, I think this third quarter at best. That's the major story of the day as far as inflation goes. So let's address some of the minor stories. Again, this is nothing drastic, nothing great, but Bitcoin is up to 62,000, up from yesterday at 61. I did also look up the all-time high. It was at 69,000, was the highest Bitcoin ever hit in November of 2021. I think it probably will break that within the next couple of weeks. Ford is partnering. I shouldn't say partnering. They are now offering Tesla Supercharging. So it's essentially an adapter that you can get for your Ford EV in order to charge at Tesla stations. I just think this is a major story because it's, I feel like the standardization of EV charging, which is bound to happen. This is why Tesla is such a powerful player in the market, just simply because they are the standard. Everybody else is adapting to their charging stations, and they have more charging stations than anybody else. It's not even a question. Best Buy. So earnings came in overestimated, which is good. Earnings per share were $2.72 above the $2.52 a share that was expected, and revenue was at $14.65 billion versus the $14.56 billion that was expected. Now, Best Buy is warning that this year might be a little lower. For some reason, because of the way their fiscal year is structured, this year is going to be a week shorter. I think that's more of a fourth quarter issue than it is a yearly issue. But they did signal that they're worried that retail sales are going to be lower for the year. I kind of don't buy it, just simply because we heard the same thing last year. So until I see evidence to the contrary, I just don't believe that this year is going to be any slower or less impactful than last year as far as sales. So we'll see. I could be proven wrong depending on what happens in the next coming months. But besides Lowe's and Home Depot, which we talked about, I talked about Lowe's yesterday. I mentioned Home Depot, except for those two because they're so greatly affected by the housing market. I don't think retail is going to be down all that much outside of players that just aren't doing it right. So I think Best Buy is going to have probably a year that's very on par with last year, given the strength of the current economic system. Last story I want to talk about is one I've kind of been foreshadowing for a long time. There's a story on Forbes today about how the White House is saying that Chinese cars on U.S. roads could undermine national security. This is no surprise, right? This is something I've talked about before, is the U.S. is very protectionist with their car market. And there is no way they're going to let Chinese cars come in without a fight. This is, and it's the usual BS of, oh, they're going to spy on us. They could have cars that, are rigged, blah, blah, blah. It's the usual fear mongering that Detroit is putting out in order to protect itself from what is very, very good cars. And of course, Tesla doesn't like this. So now they have an extra partner because Tesla, Elon Musk himself has said how much he thinks that China is a competitor to him. He doesn't see the U.S. EV market as competition. He sees the Chinese EV market as competition. If you remember that interview he had with, Al Sorkin? Is that his name? The young guy from CNBC? The crazy one where he told Disney execs to go F themselves. That's a really good interview to listen to because he goes in depth on that he thinks the EV market in 10 years is going to be Tesla and China, essentially. That's what he's calling on. And I think given everything we've heard of these cars coming out of China, I've never seen one. I've never been inside of one, but every news report I hear is that they're incredible cars. And then yesterday I reported that they're building a supercar. So I think that these are strong competition, and Detroit and Tesla are fighting it really hard to bring it into the United States. And they're not above dirty tactics. If you remember, back in the early aughts, there was a bunch of scandals with Toyota that their airbags weren't functioning and their pedals were sticking and people couldn't brake and they were crashing and dying. All that was bullshit. None of that was true. The brakes worked perfectly fine. You could, even if the acceleration did stick, if you tap the brake, there would be no crash. The brakes overpower the acceleration. The airbag story was absolute bullshit. All these stories were just used to drag Toyota's name through the mud because at the time, the Detroit automakers were on the brink of bankruptcy and almost went out of business. So they needed something to dissuade people from buying Toyotas, the best cars in the world, and buy American-made cars. So this is not above Detroit at all. This is very par for the course. This is just the first shot being fired. The fact that they're saying this means that they are terrified that these cars are coming, and that means these cars are making a play. That means that they're seeing something we're not, that these cars are coming for the U.S. market very, very soon, or at least attempting to. I think the play is probably going to be through Mexico, if I had to guess, because China has really good relations with Mexico, and Mexico has great manufacturing facilities. If they're manufactured in Mexico, they're under free trade agreements. So I think that if China wants to come to the U.S., they're going to play it through Mexico in one way or another. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this. That's pretty much it. That's the stories of the day. I will see you guys tomorrow morning. I hope you have a productive day.